The massive black ships appeared in Earth's sky, like dark clouds bringing death. They were enormous, each one the size of a city, and they moved with terrible purpose through space. Admiral Kim watched from Luna Station's observation deck as the alien vessels took their positions around his home planet. "Sir, the aliens won't talk to us," said Lieutenant Park, his hands shaking as he held the communication device. Ambassador Lee tried everything. She offered them trade deals, technology, even our surrender. They just ignore us completely. Kim's hands gripped the metal railing until his knuckles turned white. For 3 whole days, humanity had begged these creatures to speak with them. They had sent messages in every language, used every frequency, offered everything they had. The aliens, who called themselves Vorthans, had stayed silent. They just moved their giant warships into perfect attack positions above Earth. Dr. Cho ran into the observation room, her tablet computer almost falling from her trembling fingers. "Admiral Kim, the energy readings are going crazy. Those ships are charging their weapons. They're about to attack." Kim looked down at Earth through the thick glass window. The beautiful blue and green planet spun slowly below him, home to 8 billion people. Cities sparkled like jewels across the continents. The oceans reflected sunlight like mirrors. It was the most beautiful sight in the universe. He was about to watch it die. The first beam of red light cut through the darkness like a sword made of fire. Then came another, and another. Within seconds, 1,000 deadly rays were stabbing down from the alien ships into Earth's atmosphere. The beams were so bright they hurt to look at. Turning night into terrible day, Kim watched in horror as the energy weapons hit Earth's surface. Where they touched, everything turned to liquid fire. The oceans began to boil and rise as steam. Mountains melted like ice cream in summer. Entire cities vanished in seconds, leaving only glowing craters behind. The continents themselves started to glow red-hot as they turned to molten rock and glass. "Sir, we're getting emergency signals from everywhere," Park said, tears running down his face. "From New York, London, Tokyo, Seoul, ... They're all ... His voice broke as he listened to his headphones. The signals are going silent, one by one. The communication channels filled with screaming voices, people crying for help, mothers calling for their children, and then sudden, terrible silence as each city died. 8 billion voices calling out in fear and pain, and then nothing. The entire planet had become a graveyard in less than an hour. Kim pressed his forehead against the cold glass, watching his world burn. The beautiful blue oceans were gone, turned to clouds of steam that covered everything. The green forests and fields had become seas of lava. The white clouds had turned black with smoke and ash. Earth looked like a giant coal burning in space. "They didn't even try to talk to us first," whispered Park, staring at the dead communication board. "They could have demanded anything. We would have given them whatever they wanted. Why did they just ... kill everyone?" Dr. Cho sat down heavily. In a chair, her face pale with shock. "The energy readings show they're not stopping. They're still firing at the planet. They want to make sure nothing could possibly survive down there." Kim watched the Vorthan ships continue their deadly work. Their weapons fired again and again, making sure every inch of Earth's surface was turned to molten glass. They were being thorough, like exterminators, making sure every last bug was dead. That's all humanity was to them, bugs to be stepped on. "How many of us are left?" Kim asked quietly. "Maybe 50,000? Dr. Cho answered, checking her tablet. "The people. On Mars colonies, the mining stations, the deep space research posts. Everyone who wasn't on Earth when they attacked." Kim nodded slowly. 50,000 people left out of 8 billion. His wife had been visiting her sister in Seoul. His 2 children were at university in California. Gone now, turned to ash. And Glass, along with everyone else he had ever known or loved, the Vorthan ships began to move away from the dead planet, their work finished. They had probably marked Earth on their star maps as cleansed or prepared for mining. This had just been another day's work. They had wiped out an entire civilization as easily as a farmer might clear weeds from a field. "What do we do now, sir?" Park asked. "They have ships everywhere. We're just a few thousand people scattered across space stations and colonies. How can we fight an empire that can do this? Kim turned away from the window where Earth continued to burn. His face had changed. The kind expression he usually wore was gone, replaced by something cold and hard as stone. His eyes held a look that would have frightened his enemies if they had been smart enough to pay attention. We learn everything we can about them, Kim said quietly. Study their ships, their weapons, their weaknesses. We grow stronger in the shadows while they think we're all dead. And then we show them what happens when you corner a human being with nothing left to lose. The 50,000 survivors scattered across space had just become the most dangerous. People in the galaxy 6 months had passed since Earth turned to ash and glass. The survivors had learned to hide like mice in the walls of space. They lived in secret bases carved inside asteroids, in abandoned mining tunnels on distant moons, and in tiny ships that drifted through space pretending to be space junk commander. Lee sat in his hidden command room deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The rock had once been nothing special, just another piece of debris floating in the asteroid belt. Now it was home to 300 survivors, in the secret headquarters of humanity's resistance. The walls were lined with stolen computers, communication, equipment, and weapons taken from Vorthon's supply ships. "Give me the numbers," he said to his officers as they gathered around a table made from salvaged metal plates. Officer Nam looked at her tablet computer. "We found 47,000 people still alive across all the colonies. Most are hiding on Mars in the underground cities. Some are in the mining stations around Jupiter. A few hundred are living in the space stations near Saturn. Captain, Song had just returned from a dangerous supply run. Our small cargo ship was painted to look like an old mining vessel, the kind the Vorthons ignored because they seemed worthless. The Vorthons have set up huge mining machines on Earth," she reported. "They're digging deep holes all over the planet, pulling out rare metals from the ground. They're treating our world like their personal treasure chest." Engineer Kim looked up from the alien device he was taking apart on his workbench. His hands were covered in strange blue fluid that leaked from Vorthon electronics. "I have some good news, though. These aliens aren't as smart as we thought they were. Their technology is powerful, but it's not better than ours. It's just different." He held up a small metal box covered in blinking lights. "This is a Vorthon computer brain. It's very advanced, but it needs to talk to a central command system all the time. If you cut it off from the main computer, it becomes stupid very quickly. It can't think for itself at all." Dr. Park, who had been studying the aliens for months, leaned forward in her chair. "I've been watching how they behave. The Vorthons are like a beehive. They all think with one giant shared brain. Individual soldiers can't make decisions on their own. They wait for orders from their leaders, and their leaders wait for orders from some central command." She pulled up pictures on her tablet showing Vorthon soldiers standing perfectly still in formation. "Look at this. When their communication was cut for just 5 minutes, these soldiers didn't move at all. They just stood there like statues until someone told them what to do." "Oh, that explains how they conquered so many worlds," said Officer Nam. "They don't need to be creative or clever. They just build huge armies and throw them at their enemies like a giant hammer hitting a nail." Captain Song nodded. "Every world they attacked probably tried to fight them the same way. Army against army, ship against ship. The Vorthons just had bigger armies and more ships, so they always won." Commander Lee studied the holographic map floating above their table. Red dots showed where Vorthon forces were positioned throughout the solar system. They had ships orbiting Mars, mining stations on several moons, and patrol fleets moving in predictable patterns between the planets. "They're everywhere," Lee said, pointing at the red dots. "But look at how they move. Same routes every day, same patrol schedules, same responses to everything. They're like a giant machine that only knows how to do one thing." Engineer Kim grinned as he held up another piece of alien technology. "Machines can be broken if you know where to hit them." Dr. Park stood up and walked to a large screen showing video footage of Vorthon soldiers. "I've been studying their behavior for months. They've never fought an enemy like us before. Every species they conquered was organized like them. Big armies, central command, predictable tactics. What makes us different?" asked Captain Song. We're not an army anymore, Lee answered. We're scattered across space in small groups. We don't have a central command. They can attack. Each group can make its own decisions. We can change our plans quickly. We can attack from anywhere and disappear before they can respond. Officer Nam looked worried. But there are only 47,000 of us left. They have millions of soldiers and thousands of ships. How can we possibly win? Lee smiled for the first time in months. It was not a kind smile. We don't need to beat their armies. We just need to break their machine, hit their communication systems, attack their supply lines, make them confused and scared. Show them what happens when you fight an enemy that refuses to follow the rules. Engineer Kim held up a small device he had built from Vorthan parts. I've been working on something special. It's a virus that can infect their computer systems. Once it gets into their network, it will spread like a disease and make their machines turn against each other. How long until it's ready? Lee asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Lee looked around at his officers. These people had lost everything, their families, their homes, their entire world. But they hadn't given up. They had become something new, something the Vorthons had never seen before. Then we start our war in 3 weeks. Time to teach these aliens what humans do when they have nothing left to lose. The Vorthan supply ships moved through the asteroid belt like a slow-moving train on invisible tracks. 12 huge cargo vessels carried stolen treasures from Earth, protected by 4 warships that bristled with weapons. They had used this same route every week for 6 months, and nothing had ever bothered them. The aliens felt completely safe, Captain. Han watched the enemy convoy from the bridge of her stolen ship. The vessel had once belonged to the Vorthons, but now it served humanity. Her crew had painted over the alien symbols and renamed it the Silent Blade. 23. Humans worked quietly at their stations, checking weapons and preparing for the most important battle of their lives. All our people are ready, whispered Officer Kim into her headset. The mining stations have been emptied. No innocent people will get hurt. Han nodded and picked up the communication device to speak to all the hidden human fighters. Listen to me, everyone. We're not just getting revenge today. We're fighting for every human child who will never get to see a sunrise on Earth. We're fighting for our mothers and fathers who died screaming. We're fighting to show these monsters that humanity doesn't give up. The ambush began like lightning. Striking from a clear sky, huge railguns hidden inside hollow asteroids opened fire on the Vorthan escort ships. The aliens had no idea the weapons were there. Their ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, pieces of metal spinning away into space. At the same time, dozens of small human attack craft swarmed out from behind asteroids like angry wasps. They had been waiting motionless for hours, their engines cold and silent. Now they roared to life, racing toward the surprise cargo ships. The Vorthan convoy tried to respond, but they were too slow and too confused. Their remaining escort ships fired their weapons wildly in all directions, not knowing where the attacks were coming from. The humans darted between the asteroids like ghosts, appearing just long enough to fire their weapons before disappearing. Again, Sergeant Park led the first boarding party onto a Vorthon cargo ship. His rifle had been modified with alien power cells, making it much more deadly than before. Behind him, 20 human soldiers moved through the ship's corridors like shadows. The Vorthans inside the cargo ship stood frozen in confusion. They had been trained to fight against organized armies with clear battle lines. They knew how to respond when enemy ships approached in formation. But these humans were everywhere at once, attacking from different directions, using tactics the aliens had never seen before. They're just standing there, Park reported into his radio. The alien soldiers are waiting for orders, but their commanders don't know what orders to give. Captain Han smiled grimly as she listened to the reports coming in from all the boarding parties. The humans were capturing ship after ship with barely any resistance. The Vorthans were so confused by the unexpected attack that most of them simply surrendered. Within 1 hour, the entire convoy belonged to humanity. 12 massive cargo ships full of stolen Earth treasures, plus the weapons and equipment from the destroyed escort vessels. More importantly, it captured over 200 Vorthons alive, the first alien prisoners humanity had ever taken. Dr. Jung was the first human scientist to study living Vorthons up close. She watched them through the transparent walls of their prison cells, taking notes on everything they did. "This is fascinating," she told Captain Han. "Look at how they behave." The captured aliens sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't try to escape. They didn't even seem curious about their human captors. They just waited, like machines that had been turned off. "They're waiting for orders from their central command," Dr. Jung explained. "But their communication devices were destroyed in the battle. Without someone to tell them what to do, they literally can't think for themselves." She pointed to one alien who had been pacing back and forth in his cell for hours, following the exact same pattern over and over. That one was probably ordered to patrol a corridor on his ship. Since no one has told him to stop, he's still trying to patrol, even though he's in a prison cell now. Engineer Choi examined the captured alien technology with excitement. "Their weapons are incredible," he said, holding up a Vorthan energy rifle. "It's much more powerful than anything we had on Earth. And look at this. Their ships are faster than ours and have better armor." "Can we use them?" Han asked. "Absolutely. In fact, their equipment is easier to operate than ours. Everything is automated. You just point and shoot, and the computer does the rest. Perfect for a species that doesn't think for itself, Commander." Lee's voice came through the communication system from the hidden asteroid base. "Excellent work, everyone. This is just the beginning. We've shown the Vorthans that humans don't fight the way they expect. We take what we've learned and hit them again harder." Han looked at the captured alien ships, now flying under human control. Their cargo holds were full of Earth's stolen treasures, gold, rare metals, and precious stones that the Vorthans had ripped from humanity's dead world. Soon those treasures would help fund humanity's war of revenge. "What's our next target?" "There's a Vorthon mining station on one of Jupiter's moons," Lee replied. 2,000 aliens, lightly defended. They think they're safe because it's so far from Earth. Time to prove them wrong. The war had spread across the galaxy like a burning fire that could not be stopped. What started as a small human resistance had grown into something much bigger and more dangerous. On dozens of worlds, alien slaves who had suffered under Vorthon rule for centuries were finally fighting back. Commander Yoon stood on the smoking ruins of a weapons factory on the industrial planet called Nexus Prime. Around him, thousands of liberated slaves cheered and raised their fists in victory. These weren't just humans, they were Kethrans with their blue skin and forearms. Insect-like Zephyrians and many other species that had been forced to work in Vorthan factories for generations. "The factory is ours," reported Sergeant Bay, his face covered in soot from the battle. "We captured 300 Vorthon overseers and freed over 10,000 slaves. They want to join our fight." Yu nodded as he watched alien workers destroy the chains that had bound them for so long. Word of humanity's rebellion had spread to every corner of the Vorthon Empire. The story of how humans had refused to surrender, even after their world was destroyed, had inspired millions of slaves to rise up against their masters. High above, the planet Admiral Kim commanded the human fleet from his flagship, a massive Vorthon battleship that had been captured and renamed Earth's Vengeance. The ship's metal hull was covered in scars from many battles, and painted on its sides were the names of all the worlds that had joined the rebellion. Nexus Prime, Kepler Station, New Horizon, and dozens of others. "Admiral, we're getting surrender." "Messages from 3 more Vorthan colonies," reported Captain Lee from the communication station. "They say they'll leave peacefully if we let them go." Admiral Kim's face was like stone. His hair had turned completely white during 2 years of constant war, and his eyes held a coldness that made even his own officers uncomfortable. "Tell them no. The Vorthons showed no mercy when they burned Earth. They'll get no mercy from us." On the main viewing screen, the Vorthon homeworld grew larger as the human fleet approached. It was a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green continents, much like Earth had been before the aliens destroyed it. Millions of Vorthans lived on the surface, going about their daily lives, not knowing that death was coming from space. The planet's defenses had already been destroyed by human stealth attacks. The massive space stations that protected the world had been blown up one by one over the past month. The Vorthon fleet that had once seemed invincible was now scattered wreckage floating in space. Dr. Shin, the fleet's chief scientist, walked up to Admiral Kim carrying a tablet computer. The orbital bombardment weapons are ready, sir. Our ships are in position. We can begin the attack whenever you give the order. Kim stared down at the alien world through the thick glass of the viewing screen. He thought about Earth, about the 8 billion people who had died screaming as their world burned. He thought about his wife and children, turned to ash in seconds by Vorthon weapons. He thought about every human who had died because these aliens saw them as nothing more than bugs to be stepped on. How many Vorthons live down there? He asked quietly. Approximately 12 billion, Dr. Shin replied. Men, women, children, entire families. Most of them have never even seen a human before. Admiral Kim was silent for a long moment. Around the bridge, his officers waited for his decision. They had all lost family and friends when Earth died. They had all sworn to make the Vorthons pay for their crimes. But now, faced with the chance to destroy an entire world, some of them looked uncertain. "Sir," said Captain Lee softly, "are we really going to do this? Kill billions of innocent people?" Kim turned to face his officers. Were the 8 billion humans on Earth guilty of anything? Did our children deserve to die? Did our mothers and fathers deserve to be burned alive? His voice was cold as space itself. The Vorthons made their choice when they destroyed our world. Now they get to live with the consequences. He walked to the communication panel and pressed the button that would send his order to every ship in the fleet. All vessels, prepare to fire. Target every major city and military installation. Leave nothing alive. The weapon systems on dozens of human ships began to charge with deadly energy. On the planet below, Vorthon families continued their normal lives, unaware that their world was about to become a ball of fire and ash. "Weapons ready, sir," reported the weapons officer. Admiral Kim looked one last time at the beautiful blue world below. It reminded him so much of Earth that it almost hurt to look at. But Earth was gone, turned to glass and cinders by the very people who lived on this world. Justice demanded payment in blood. Fire. The first beams of energy lanced down from the human fleet, cutting through the planet's atmosphere like swords made of light. Then came more beams, and more, until the entire world was being carved apart by weapons of terrible power. Cities vanished in explosions of fire. Oceans boiled and turned to steam. The beautiful blue world began to glow red-hot as it died. Admiral Kim watched without emotion as the Vorthon homeworld burned. "Now, you know how it feels," he whispered. The war was over.
Ow.
After 3 long years of fighting, the mighty Vorthon Empire had fallen to pieces like a house made of cards. Their homeworld was now a ball of cooling ash floating in space. Their great fleets were nothing but twisted metal drifting between the stars. The colonies that had once served them with fear now celebrated their freedom. Captain Song stood alone. In the memorial room aboard the great warship Earth's Vengeance, the chamber was quiet and peaceful. It's filled with soft blue light from holographic flames that danced around images of Earth as it used to be. Green forests, blue oceans, white clouds, and cities full of life, all preserved in light. The only way humanity could still see their lost home. In her hand, Song held a small container filled with gray dust. It was ash from the Vorthon homeworld, collected after the planet burned. She opened the container slowly and poured the alien ash into the memorial flames. Watching it mix with the dust of Earth that floated there, Lieutenant Park entered the chamber, his young face marked with scars from many battles. He had been just 18 when Earth died, fresh out of the Space Academy. Now he was 21 and looked much older, his eyes holding the weight of everything he had seen and done. "Captain, is this really justice?" Park asked quietly, staring at the mixed ashes floating in the holographic fire. "We destroyed their entire world, killed billions of people who had nothing to do with what happened to Earth." Admiral Kim walked into the memorial chamber, his hair now completely white from 3 years of constant war. His face looked tired, older than his 50 years. "I had commanded the human fleet through dozens of battles, making decisions that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Justice would be having our world back," Kim said slowly. his voice heavy with sadness. Justice would be 8 billion people still alive, still laughing, still loving each other. What we did wasn't justice. It was just the price they had to pay for their cruelty. The memorial chamber became very quiet. The only sound was the gentle humming of the ship's life, support systems keeping them all alive in the cold emptiness of space. On the walls around them, 8 billion names glowed softly, every single human who had died when Earth burned. Men, women, children, grandparents. Babies all remembered here in letters of light. Below the human names, new names appeared every day. Catherines with their blue skin and 4 arms. Strange insect-like creatures called Zellions. Shitting. People of the Morphic Collective. Dozens of different alien species that had been slaves of the Vorthons for centuries, now free to live their own lives and make their own choices. "Sir, what happens now?" asked Commander Lee as he joined them in the memorial chamber. "The war is over. The Vorthons are gone. What do we do with the rest of our lives?" Admiral Kim turned away from the wall of names and looked at his officers. These people had followed him through hell and back. They had lost everything and then fought to take revenge for their losses. Now, they had to figure out how to live. In a galaxy where their enemy no longer existed, "Now we make sure this never happens again," Kim said firmly. "We patrol the trade routes between worlds. We watch for any species that tries to build an empire by conquering others. We protect the weak from the strong, become the guardians this galaxy needs." Through the large windows of the memorial chamber, they could see the human fleet spreading out across space. Hundreds of ships that had once belonged to the Vorthons, now painted with human symbols and crewed by the survivors of Earth. Each ship was heading to a different part of the galaxy. Carrying human crews who would watch over the new peace, Captain Song picked up another container. This one filled with Earth's ash that had been carefully preserved since the planet's destruction. She poured it into the memorial flames, watching as the dust of humanity's birth world mixed with the ashes of its destroyers. Both civilizations had been reduced to nothing but dust and memories. "The difference," Song said quietly, "is that people will remember Earth with love. Children across the galaxy will hear stories about the beautiful blue world and the people who lived there. But the Vorthons will be remembered only as a warning. What happens when you think you're better than everyone else?" Lieutenant Park nodded slowly. "My sister was only 6 when Earth died. She was in school, probably learning about the solar system, maybe drawing pictures of astronauts. She'll never get to grow up, never get married, never have children of her own, but because of what we did, millions of other children on other worlds will get to live free lives." Admiral Kim placed his hand on the young officer's shoulder. "That's what we fought for. Not revenge, though that's what it looked like. We fought so that no other species would have to watch their world burn while their enemies ignored their pleas for mercy." The human fleet continued to spread across the galaxy, each ship carrying survivors who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the only way to stop evil is to become something terrifying yourself. They would spend the rest of their lives making sure no other species would repeat the Vorthons' mistake in the memorial chamber. Earth's ash danced with the dust of its destroyers, both civilizations now nothing but memories floating in holographic fire.